Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, 40 years since an iconic image of a teenager carrying a dying student during protests in Johannesburg marked a sea change that led to the end of apartheid, South Africa marks the anniversary of the Soweto uprisings. Well, that is also the date for the International Day of the African Child. We head to Kinshasa to meet some of the kids who've been thrown out onto the streets accused of witchcraft. Some, though, have been offered a vital lifeline. We meet some of those trying to help them. And as the Nigerian government struggles to get militants from the Niger Delta to stop attacking oil infrastructure, those living in the resource-rich region remain frustrated with the exploitation and pollution. But first, on Thursday, South Africans commemorated the 40 years since an uprising of black school children in Soweto, Johannesburg, sparked a deadly crackdown that launched a landmark opposition to white minority rule. Hundreds died in the crackdown, but it galvanized international efforts to end racial segregation.
It's the iconic picture of the 1976 Soweto uprising, the body of 13-year-old Hector Peterson being carried away by a student. South Africa's vice president laid a wreath at the Hector Peterson Memorial 40 years after the event. In a Soweto stadium, President Jacob Zuma paid tribute to the hundreds who were killed when security forces fired on black students in 1976. 10,000 students had marched to protest against the compulsory use of Afrikaans in black schools.
The country is celebrating the heroism of students who stood up to the apartheid state as they fought for their rights and the liberation of their country from racial oppression.
Seth Mazibuko was a student leader during the uprising. He was jailed for years on Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was also imprisoned.
Not only were students feeling the pain of being taught in Afrikaans, the language of the oppressor, but also the students were feeling the system itself that was led by those who were oppressing them. So it was a practical feeling of students exploding.
The 1976 protests fueled a struggle that eventually led to the fall of white minority rule. But it took time. It was only in 1994 that blacks were granted the right to vote and that Mandela was elected president. And 40 years after the uprising, black South Africans still endure worse education, housing and unemployment than white citizens.
Now, June 16th is a national holiday in South Africa. The Soweto uprising's anniversary has, though, also been chosen as the annual International Day of the African Child. That's when governments and NGOs often focus discussions on the rights and problems faced by kids on the continent. Our correspondent sent us this report on the difficulties faced by street children living in DR Congo's capital.
Merdi is 13, and until not long ago, she lived alone on the streets of Kinshasa. 2 years ago, she was accused of sorcery and thrown out of her family home.
When you live on the streets, no one's there to help you find food or medication. It's impossible to find somewhere to clean yourself up. Living in the street is hard. You see your friends dirty and suffering, and it hurts so much because you're in the same situation.
Merdi sought refuge at the BBS Center, which takes in young girls like her who have no one else to turn to. Here they see doctors, go to lessons, and even get help finding lost family members. The organization is tackling the growing number of street children head-on in the hopes of helping them start a new life.
This is a real shame, and we feel really strongly about this issue. This is why we do what we do. We do everything to tackle this huge problem and ultimately get rid of it. Things are getting slightly better. Some children are off the street, though some are still there, because of the socio-economic situation of our country.
In Kinshasa, many turn to crime and prostitution to make a living. Some who've escaped this tough street life are urging communities to be more suspicious of superstitions that can cause so much suffering to vulnerable children.
I would like Thursday to be a better day for children. Parents need to recognize that their children are not witches. They have to keep their children with them, at home. Children are simply accused of being witches. They're not. Stop accusing them.
More than 20,000 street kids live in Kinshasa. Offering them a lifeline isn't easy, and projects like the BBS Center make a vital difference. But children's groups are calling for more support from the government.
Well, Eritrea claims that its soldiers killed more than 200 Ethiopians in battling seen last week, some of the fiercest border clashes between the hostile neighbours since the end of a war in 2000. Now, each side blames the other for starting the fighting. Ethiopia claims that there were casualties on both sides, but that it was Eritrea that suffered the bulk of losses. Now, Eritrea's foreign minister spoken to France 24, demanding that Ethiopia pull out of disputed land as ordered by a binding border ruling of 2002. Here's what he had to say.
Ethiopia is the one who started the war. Ethiopia has to withdraw from the occupied territories. This is a lasting solution. They have to withdraw. Eritrea is ready to normalize what called the relationship after the withdrawal.
In Libya, 10 fighters of the Government of National Accord have been killed in a wave of suicide bombings by IS group militants in Sirte. The extremists are trying to retake it after pro-GNA militia advanced into the port city last week. That's since stalled. Jihadist groups took root in Libya late 2014, taking advantage of the chaos that followed the 2011 revolution. Niger says that 34 people, including 20 children, have died whilst trying to cross the Sahara Desert. The victims are believed to have been trying to reach Europe. Their bodies are reportedly found near the Algerian border. The government's vowed to crack down on the traffickers who demand high prices to take people on the dangerous desert voyage. A Kenyan court's thrown out a bid to ban rectal examinations of people suspected of being gay. Rights campaigners have called the practice abhorrent, and a challenge against it was brought by two men who were forced to undergo it by police. In Kenya, homosexuality carries up to a 14-year prison sentence, although prosecutions are rare. In greenlighting the procedure, the ruling judge in Mombasa said that it was the only way to tell if people are gay. The plaintiffs are likely to appeal the decision. Now, Nigeria is still struggling to get militants from the Niger Delta to stop attacks on vital oil facilities. Now, the Niger Delta Avengers want locals to get a bigger share in the profits from the natural resources taken from their land. Communities in the region feel frustrated at the exploitation, pollution, and broken promises of investment.
The Nigeria Maritime University was supposed to be built here, in the mangrove creeks of the Niger Delta. But construction stopped, and now workers stand idle. The university was supposed to offer an alternative to life as a militant, sabotaging oil pipelines in the creek. But today it's a symbol of the region's frustrated dreams.
For over 6 months, we have not been working. Staff have not been paid. The contractors has the money. You know, for this kind of this magnitude of project, it is difficult for him. Where will he go and borrow and be paying when we are not sure when government will pay?
In the nearby village of Koko, people are worried. The army has invaded the region, looking for a former warlord known as Tom Polo, who was a patron of the university. Despite being accused of corruption and forced into hiding, Tom Polo is seen as the region's Robin Hood. And so are the Niger Delta Avengers, an armed group destroying oil infrastructure and demanding a better life for those in the riverlands.
I want to get better situation for the community now. No network, nothing, no lights. We are in darkness. We are inside bush. We are not a human being. See us.
The dramatic cuts in oil output has pushed the Nigerian government to suspend its military operations and begin talks. The militants want President Buhari to continue paying amnesty payments to some 30,000 rebels. They also demand classes to start at the university. In exchange, they say they'll stop their attacks. Maybe the only way for Nigeria to get its economy back on track and for some peace to return to the Niger Delta.
Well, finally, she made it. A Kenyan woman whose photoshopped pictures of herself on her dream holidays went viral finally has seen a little bit, at least, of the real thing. Evelyn Gatt's original photographs saw her plonked onto the Great Wall of China along with other locations. That was earlier this year. Well, since then, Kenyan businessman Sam Gichuru decided to make her dreams a reality and helped raise the money needed to send her to China. So on Thursday, he finally tweeted shots of her from the real wall, and he says that he hopes other Kenyans will follow their dream. Well, you had a smashing time, Evelyn. That is, though, where we have to leave it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us, and please do so again if you can. Take care.